Guys, welcome back to the Be Contagious Leadership Experience. We've got another great guest today. He is author extraordinaire, Rafe Bartholomew, right? Did I say it right?
You got it right, yes. With no rehearsals, we nailed it.
No rehearsals. I usually get everybody's name wrong. In fact, everybody gets my name wrong. They think I'm Fernando, Orlando, any other name but Hernando with it and everything, man. Thanks for coming on the show.
I'm happy to be here. I mean, we've been in touch online for years, I know, and I wasn't sure whether to say Hernando, Coach, H. I mean, I've seen a lot of different versions, so here we are.
We're here, man. Well, I'm glad we can make it work. Rafe, you're an author. You have been writing for years. If you don't mind, just share a couple of your work, like in who you've been working for, just to kind of give the elevator speech of who you are, so we can come up to speed.
Right. So I've worked as a writer and editor over the course of my career in media and sports journalism. It started actually with me moving to the Philippines after college, where I wound up writing a book about Philippine basketball called Pacific Rims. And that really was the beginning of everything for me, both, career-wise, in terms of things I might have wanted and things I never knew I was going to love as much as I do to this day. So I've written another book that's not at sports at all. That's actually about my father and his career as a bartender in the oldest bar in New York City, where I grew up. And I was in the bar. I worked there and was kind of, sort of like a coming of age tale in the bar. And then I got the opportunity also to write or to co-author an oral history about basketball that was connected to Basketball, A Love Story, the ESPN documentary. So I got to work with Jackie McMullen and Dan Flores, the director of the film, and they hired Jackie and I to sort of put together the oral history using their transcripts. So that's my career as an author. And while doing that, I've also been working at publications over the years, from magazines about current affairs and stuff. Longest chunk of my career was spent at ESPN with the website Grantland, working for Bill Simmons there. And then have bounced around sort of ever since. And also, I mean, I love this stuff, even though it's a little bit lower profile. I've gotten to go back and work on TV documentaries about basketball in the Philippines a few times over the years. So it's been a lot. It's been quite a journey, and sometimes ping pong balling all over the place.
Well, the great thing about your journey is that a lot of people, they're like, yo, your background's unbelievable. You've been able to travel. You've been able to do all these different things, right? Well, sometimes we kind of forget, and I'm not saying you are, but that, our life is kind of cool. It's not a bad journey, even though it's so many ups and downs.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really is so cool. You think of the opportunities that have come, the experiences that, so few people get to have, and seeing different parts of the world, the people you get to interact with. I mean, I think especially of some of the experiences I've had in the Philippines, where I have gotten to play basketball with absolute legends in the country. They were retired, so they weren't busting my, I don't know, you want me to busting
you can
my
cuss,
butt,
no problem. You cuss.
Busting my ass. They weren't busting my ass quite as much as they would have in their primes. But I've gotten to be around people who are really, I mean, like at Jerry West levels in Philippine basketball, and they they treat me like a friend and stuff. Like I almost have to pinch yourself, like, wow, how did I end up here? I didn't, 3 yeyears before I moved to the country, I didn't even know this person existed. Now it's like, here I am. It means so much to me. And it's been, and something like working for Bill Simmons, having been to the man's house. I mean, yeah, that is something that comes up all the time. I'll tell you, people, whenever I'm at like a wedding or anything, they're like, so what's he really like, man? Tell me about Bill. And the truth, this is the truth. It's what I say, it's what I'll say now. It's what he's exactly the man you hear on the podcast.
Right.
The jokes, everything is the same. And I mean, it's sort of funny the first time you meet him, because it's like, I was expecting to hear a little something different too. And
right.
It's just sort of like, this is exactly who I've known since I was like, for me, I guess in high school, starting to read his columns.
Right. Wow. No, it is a beautiful thing. How did you end up going to the Philippines? right? Of all of, and for a lot of people who don't know, I think the Philippines, I know when I was there, either number one or number two, they download the most basketball, I know NBA type footage than any country. Basketball crazed country. It's a religion, as you wrote in your book and everything. How did you get there?
Basketball is what took me there. So I think the one constant throughout my life, for better or worse, I mean, it has been the sport of basketball.
Right.
I fell in love with the game at an early age. I was good enough to be a good high school player and, play like club basketball in college. And more importantly, it was the love of the game that I sort of got and stayed with forever. I probably have shown it on camera. I have a broken hand that I suffered about a month ago in a basketball game. And probably against doctor's orders, I'll be back on the court as soon as I can be.
Yep.
So it's just how, and it was basketball that led me to the Philippines. A lot of the time, you don't run into a lot of foreigners in the country this is what people used to ask me all the time. They would say, are you a Mormon? Are you a missionary of some sort? Are you a Marine? And I would be like, no, I'm here to study the history of basketball in the country and what it means to in Philippine society. And they'd be like, oh, so you're CIA. And I'm like, no. So it really was a sport that brought me there. And I wound up living in Manila for 3 years and have been back and forth, ever since for the rest of, to this day. I'm trying to get back later this year for the first time since the pandemic began. So that's a fingers crossed. And again, basketball has sort of been a through line through all of that. It's been, the writing that I did about the sport is what sort of caught the eye of ESPN and the people working for Bill Simmons, who recommended me to work for them at Grantland back then. And obviously it led to me getting to work on that amazing book with Jackie McMullen, who's a Hall of Famer. And that's been the one thing that I've always found a way to play, no matter where I've lived and bounced around, and no matter how bad I get as I get older. And the sport has sort of been a through line for me, and that's what first brought me to the Philippines.
I think people, if you're a basketball enthusiast, you have to not only read the book, but the other part is that you have to actually look up online things. Unless you're going to fly to the Philippines and go to the different provinces and play basketball on the dirt roads in your chanelas, which is sandals, in a broken backboard, not even a backboard, like a piece of wood. If you're
hood
lucky,
of a car, it could be anything.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. And I coached college basketball. I was the consultant for UE, the University of the East, right? So they're in the Recto area, which people who don't know, the Recto area is not the greatest of neighborhoods, but it's also right next to the capital. And so when I got there, the first thing the GM basically was like, hey, coach, so you don't go out of these gates. And I lived in a compound with all the players. Don't go out of these gates after 7 p.m. And I was like, I don't understand why. So of course I don't follow directions very well. So I leave. It's like 7. I'm walking around. The sun is going down, and there is no little. I can't describe the shadiness and the fear that overwhelms you because you don't know what's happening because you're already warned. But then you'd go through there, I do it. It's not even tunnels there. Again, I can't even describe it, but you're going through these different areas. And then all of a sudden you walk into this somewhat quasi small arena, and there's 500 people watching. It's not even a pro game. It's not even I guess it's a league, and they all have uniforms, refs. I mean, did you have the same experience?
Absolutely. And I consider myself lucky. One, I think an advantage of being sort of a complete foreigner when I moved to the country was that I have a lot of friends who I had a scholarship in the same scholarship program as I was in. But a lot of them were Filipino American, and they had family in the country, and their family was very protective of them for understandable reasons. I mean, it's a busy city, it's very crowded, there is crime, but for me, I was sort of free to roam, and what I quickly found, and this is something I think people find when it's like the city you grow up in, you have these barriers up, like, oh, you can't go to that place. But if you just show up in a new place and you don't know where you're going, you can wander around like an idiot in the places you should never be, or at least
Right.
people think you should never be. And then you find that the people there treat you well. They
Oh yeah.
especially, I mean, look, I'm 6'3". I was over there in my 20s. And there's a basketball game going on, a 3-on-3 half-court game in the street. Some of those games, like you're talking about, in like the municipal covered courts, where I mean,
Yeah.
that's one thing. It blew my mind, because these are, the Philippines is not a wealthy nation. It's still a
Right.
developing country. But every neighborhood has a covered court that is up there with the best outdoor public courts I've seen. And I growing up in New York City, or playing
Yeah.
outside pickup ball around the States, where, fiberglass backboards and a
Right.
little arena, good size. It was always like, man, this is the nicest public infrastructure. Often is a basketball court, which is not really a good thing in a global sense.
Right.
But for a basketball loving person, it is a great, you feel like, man, I could go anywhere and find a basketball court. And you see, I mean, if you got to travel around the province at all, you're like climbing a mountain, or like
Right.
island hopping, and on you ride a boat to an island for an hour and a half, and it's this tiny island, and they got a nice court too.
Yep.
It's just and I do tell other people who really love the game that to put the Philippines on their bucket list, because it's a special place. The passion for the game, the way it's deeply rooted in just everyone's lives, is something that you can't experience anywhere else.
Yeah. No. And then on top of that, guys, it's you add the humidity,
It's also hot as
which
hell.
is again, one of those things you just can't describe. It's like cutting through a humid blanket. You're just walking through, and you just add those things. So you went to the Philippines, you started talking, obviously ask questions, having interviews and everything else, writing that book. Talk about the certain discipline, I think the responsibility of putting the best thing forward, the pressures that could probably, come up with that as well too. And then how did you lead yourself? I know you enjoy writing, right? Because you're a writer, but how do you lead yourself in making it the best you possibly can make it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're right. Because, and that's something, one of the first lessons I sort of took in that process was sort of that having to take a leap of faith myself in my ability to do that. Because now, if you ask me to, write a book about something, I know how to get that done. I know steps, A, B, C, D, all the way up to Z, and we're publishing a book. At that point in time, I had written magazine articles. I had gone to journalism school, but I was 23, 24 years old. If you put me on a lie detector test, I wouldn't have been able to tell you that, yes, I can finish this book. I will do that. I guarantee it. But I knew I wanted to do it. I believed in the story. I believed that the community and the role of basketball in the country was this as special as I thought it was. And I believed that other people who didn't already know about that, who weren't, who didn't have ties to the country, would feel the same way if they saw this book. And so I had to just go for it, and I had to say, and that, so I really was the discipline aspect was looking up every step of the way and finding creative solutions to go through a publishing process that I had no one to guide me through. And back then the internet was not quite, it was 2005, 2006.
Right.
Internet was there, but it's not quite as chock full of resources as you might find today. I remember I found, one of the hardest first hurdles for me was finding a literary agent, because it is almost impossible to publish a book at like a major publisher without an agent. I think maybe at that point in time, 1% of books or manuscripts that arrived like independently would get published. So you needed an agent. And I didn't know any agents. I didn't know how to find an agent. So I found a book that listed sort of like the steps and how to publish a book, how to find an agent. And I started looking up in the back of magazines and manuals, sort of like who or books I'd read, the acknowledgments, they say, who is the agent? If it's a book that I had read, the book that I had, that sort of one of the books that helped me learn about Philippine basketball in the first place, was by a Sports Illustrated writer. I checked out the back of that, saw his acknowledgments, and saw who his agent was. So his agent didn't eventually become my agent, but it was someone I could reach out to. It was a start.
Yep.
And people like that gave me feedback saying, oh, look, you're not ready quite for this yet, but this is not a bad idea. You don't appear to be an idiot. You
Right.
seem to be committed. So, stick with it, and like maybe go to another agency sort of down a little bit further down in the publishing like food chain, but not just like not as powerful, not that they can't get it done. And so I ended up sending out, and selling a book about Philippine basketball to a U.S. publisher. I mean, they don't like, these are English major people. I am too in a lot of ways. I have that side of me, but they don't all share my love for basketball or sports in general. And so I really had to convince people that this was as incredible a story as I thought it was. And I had to send out 50 plus proposals.
Wow.
All with a sample chapter of the book, and everything. The proposal went out at about 50 pages. And actually, because I was in Manila at the time, I also, the other thing is ask for help. I had my father, thankfully, who was I sent him proposals, and he was in New York, so he was able to mail them out for me.
Oh,
And
yes.
then
I was about to say.
yes. Oh my, the Postal Service in Manila, it would have been expensive. And I mean, my record of receiving mail that I knew was sent to me was not great over my years living there. It was but through that process, I was able to find an agent. She was able to then guide me through the rest to like make my proposal better. And also the other leap of faith aspect of it was, sort of in selling myself to basketball people in the country. So I spent an entire season with a team in the PBA, which is the highest level of professional basketball in the country. And it's also the second oldest professional basketball league in the world after the NBA. And I had to, even though I didn't have everything lined up yet, I had to go in and say, look, this is what I've already written. Here are my clips. Here's a story in the New York Times I got. Here's another story I wrote about the league. Can you set me up with a team? And was fortunate enough to find a team and a coach that was interested in letting me hang around and be inside the locker room. And it was a lot of, it was a labor of love and a big leap of faith at the same time. I say one thing that helped me do all that work and stick with it, even though I wasn't sure what the outcome would be, even while I was doing it. I was hopeful. I believed in the story, but I didn't have a contract in hand. I was doing the work and gonna sell it after. And the thing that helps me do that is loving the subject matter. I mean, something like a book is difficult. It's a passion project. It's you can do it just for money, but it's a lot of work, and the money is not that big. Like if you want to do something just for money, you can find another profession than being a writer. So it was, and I think that has been the case in other book projects I've worked on since then. I've been very lucky to work on 3 books that all were, I really loved the subject matter in one way or another, and I felt that internal drive. I had this strong intrinsic motivation to keep, to do whatever it takes and to get it done and stick with it and sell it if I needed to, convince people who, I keep going back to, literary agents in New York who never heard of me, had never thought of Philippine basketball, never, just like this is all off the radar for them. And I had to go in there and convince them that this was a good idea, something to put money behind. And, I look, more people said no then yes, but it only takes one. It only takes one to say yes.
That's right.
I think it worked out for them. I mean, the book did way better than they expected, and it's still in print more than 10 years later, because even though it wasn't something that the New York literary community knew was a big deal. It is, and it continues to be something that people read and seek out to learn more about the sport in the country.
Yeah. No, I mean, I just love your story in itself because, right, it's perseverance, it's pushing through. It's just like any athlete or any coach or any business leader for that matter. What would be, do you have like your greatest Philippine coaching story? Anything pops in your head? Because I'm sure there is a few the way it is in the Philippines.
That's a couple. I mean, I'll say, so the team I got to spend the most time with was for the book was the Alaska Aces, who at the time were coached by Tim Cohn, who is an American coach who moved to the Philippines when he was 8 years old, and is now the coach of another team, which is the most famous one in the country, and he's won the most championships now of any coach. And he was already a very highly respected, experienced coach then. Now he's an even bigger deal. Two things and so it was really a privilege to be around him, see how he worked and taught and led his team, and also just have him be so willing to open his doors to me. The two stories that always come to mind about that is or that experience, that season I spent with them. First is just how I remember interviewing him once about how he started coaching, how he got into the sport, and his early years as a professional coach. When he got to start very young. He was usually, I mean, he would have players who were older than him when at the beginning of his career. Some of his vets would be older than him, and he had to earn their respect. But the story he tells is how he's famous. One of the things he's famous for is winning championships with the triangle offense. And this was something he was searching for, an offense that he felt comfortable with, he believed in, and he thought he could win with. And he was looking for this in the early 90s, mid 90s. And he didn't. Instead of, it wasn't like now where you could go pull up YouTube and find. This is okay. Okay. Here's the, this is the blind pig entry. This is all this. Like he taught himself this. I mean, this was one of his stories of perseverance, and just willing himself into a level of expertise that wasn't taught by Tex Winter, the originator of the offense, coming over and doing a coaching clinic during the NBA offseason. This was Tim Cohn intercepting the feed of Chicago Bulls games that was going to the U.S. Air Force and Navy bases in the country at the time. Like, he said, I remember he got the big bunny ears and had on a television set, and had the tinfoil on it just so he could and he recorded the 90s Bulls games with Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Phil Jackson, and they were running the triangle offense, and he saw what they were doing, and over time charted it out by himself, being like, I like this, I want to learn, teach myself this, and then teach it to my players. And slowly but surely he developed it. And I remember by the time in the late 90s, when one of the Bulls coaches, Tex Winter, that coach, visited him in Manila, it was the first time they'd met, and Tim said that Tex, his mind was blown, because he was like, how did you figure this out? Like, if I didn't teach you, how did you figure out? And he's like, well, I just watched it until I broke it all down, and then I built it back up, and I taught it to the players, and they ran it. And he was like, you're running this better than our NBA teams sometimes do. I mean, obviously the NBA teams had the players that they could break the rules a little bit, but that it's just an incredible story to me, that he just taught himself this thing, that now I think of I would just have to read a book, or I would have to watch a tutorial. No, I mean, he just reassembled it. And then the other thing, Tim, the other side of coaching is that I've observed with him and how he led, is just like, managing personalities, and not just
Oh
any
yeah.
personalities, but professional athletes and professional basketball players, as you know, in the Philippines. I mean, anywhere they are, strong-willed, confident men. But they're some of the biggest stars in the country there, and he has to get them working together and not fighting. And there, there was one game at halftime where it was like a game 5 of the finals. And they were playing terrible. And we're getting blown out. And he knew they were gonna. He said he knew they were gonna lose. So at halftime, he came in and just threw threw the whiteboard across the room, almost hit a player, and just went crazy. And there was also some infighting on the team at that moment. The two of the best players weren't getting along. They didn't, one guy, because they had it wasn't jealousy, it was approach to how to play. They had such different personalities. One guy, the most joyful, happy-go-lucky basketball player you've ever seen, right?
Right.
He is so talented. The game comes so easily to him. He knows everything without even having to be taught it in some ways. He had great instincts. And then another player who was just hard work epitomized, and they were the two best players. But they clashed because, he's like, hey man, why are you taking it so easy? We're getting our asses kicked over here. And then the other guy's like, look, I'm playing my best. It's just life. And and so they had this huge fight. I was in there thinking, okay, the two best players look like they're about to kill each other. The coach just threw a whiteboard across the room and looks like he wants to kill both of them. This series is over. This is the end of the book. This is part. Shut it down. And instead, and the next day at the practice, it was very subdued, still quiet. Everybody was sort of still licking their wounds, but I remember talking to Tim after that practice, and they were going to be playing game 6 the next day, and he's like, I feel pretty confident. I think they're gonna, it's like that was the calm, the calm before the storm,
Right.
or it's just sort of like, and he said, I mean, this is obviously sort of a coaching cliche, but I think at my age, at that time, it was the first time I'd ever heard it. And he's like, look, I've been in a lot of 6-7 game series before. I've had these kind of fights. We're either going to win or we lose. And if we lose, we're all going to go home pissed off anyway, whether we like each other or not. And we'll just have to come back next season. And if we win, winning heals everything.
Yep.
And they won the series. Everybody got bonuses. Everybody was, planning to go to Disney World together, literally. And it was just one of those, seeing how calm he could be when it seemed like everything was falling apart. Like he even in his anger, when he threw that whiteboard, he was still calm. He knew what he was doing, and that's something I obviously comes with experience, but also temperament. Like he was able to have a will that could match that of all these really, really, like top athletes in the country.
Yeah. People don't realize Tim Cohn, I think he's won close to maybe 30 championships.
It's up into the 20s now. I think it was
30.
I was there for, I think, number 13.
Yeah. How crazy. And I think a lot of times too, I think in during the year, right, the regular year, there's about 2 or 3 pro leagues that go after each other. So that helps. But imagine the experience that you have to do. And in the Philippines, I mean, the other part that I think a lot of leagues don't ever talk about is that in the Philippines, especially, I think like one owner owns like 5 or 6 teams. And at the time, I think Alaska was like its own type of like entity team that didn't have the big money. So he had to like trying to get players to come over and everything else, because they were all part of the contract negotiations. I mean, it is I think, Tim is now the coach of Ginebra, I think, right? Ginebra is the most.
Ginebra, and they're sort of like the long time, fan favorite of the entire country. It was sort of amazing, and they were huge rivals with Tim's team, because Alaska is a milk company, and Ginebra is a gin company, and like Alaska was trying to be wholesome good boys. Ginebra was always one of the most physical teams, and they brought in like a very street tough crowd. And it was just, and so I remember when he first went over to Ginebra, it was sort of, people were like, how's he going to do this? He's not Ginebra, he's an Alaska boy.
Yeah.
But that's another thing. I mean, that flexibility is something that has clearly a key to his success. I mean, he hasn't succeeded in one place now. It's been three.
Right. And I mean, and you are technically a superstar in the Philippines because you wrote about Philippine basketball.
I don't know if I think I might be like down to like G list at this point, but there was a moment where, so look, I mean, the attention, putting the international attention on the sport really did resonate with Philippine readers, because it's something that everyone in the country knows that
Mm-hmm.
basketball is this national treasure, and that there's this really amazing culture around the sport there. But not too many, because the country doesn't do great in international competitions, and there hasn't been a born and bred Filipino NBA player yet. It doesn't have the reputation in the rest of the world that matches up to how passionate the country is. So to shine that spotlight on it, I think really did mean a lot to a lot of people. And I think it also, I mean, I've heard over the years from dozens of Filipino American readers who grew up playing basketball, loving the game, but not hadn't gotten the opportunity to visit the country yet.
Yeah.
They're born and raised on over here, and then like, oh wow, now I gotta get why my dad is so crazy about basketball, why my
Right.
uncles why my uncles spend every Sunday morning like at the league, and how so it really, I think it did connect in that way, and I'm grateful for the way that people opened up to me and let me write that book. And also, and I think the thing I've been proudest of with that is how I people said I got it right,
Yeah.
because unfortunately people in the States, to a non-Filipino audience, you could probably make up things about the country, and
Right.
people would just be like, oh yeah, okay, whatever. But there, you can't BS the people who live it, and
Yeah.
the fact that they thought that I did a good job with their story is really the thing that meant the most to me, and still means the most to me.
Yeah. It's a fascinating country. I mean, I was supposed to go this year. I'll probably go next year. I still have brothers and sisters who live in Manila. And I think, again, just for the audience, they don't quite understand, Manila is what I think last time was like 13 million people live in Metro Manila. And then it swells up to like 18, 19 million people a day. So the traffic, people going to, to a game, going to practice, you probably just trying to get to one place to another place is so difficult, because you're just in traffic half the time. I took so many naps in the car in the Philippines because of traffic.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, I'm glad I did it. I learned to commute, because I was sort of on my own when I started, and it was my way of learning my way around the city. Yep. And feeling, just sort of, and also like I grew up, I had an hour and a half ride to my high school on the subway, growing up in New York. So it was like my home in some ways. That part of life felt more familiar to me than a lot of things, and helped me get started, get my feet wet on the ground there.
Yeah. One of the most, I think, impressive things about you is that, your ability to communicate, obviously going to another country without really not knowing a whole, getting embedded with the team and the culture and basketball. Then, of course, going to Grantland, going to all these different, places and venues and things you have, how important it is to relate, connect with the different people that you come across. And have you ever thought like how you do it, right? How can I do it at a level where you probably know people who haven't been able to crack that code?
I think some of it, I don't think it is, I don't think it's something that you're necessarily, I mean, I think you can be born with it, but I think it's also something that you learn over time through experience. It's hard to really explain. Like, I can't tell you that this is 100% the way it is, but for me, I've always believed that my experience growing up, in another big city like New York, where when I was commuting from an early age, when I was you're just around people all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and had experiences, with through sports, through school, through just being a person growing up in a diverse city. You get to you feel comfortable in a lot of different situations, and it sort of gives you, and it gives you I think, for me, that what I think has worked, and what I sort of believe in for myself, and try to be, is a sort of a combination of inwardly very confident in myself. Like, if I am going to try to do something, it's something that I think that I can accomplish. It's something, and I so far have usually been able to make that happen in a lot of different ways. And if it's but also outwardly being humble, listening
Mm-hmm.
to people. And I know people, I mean, you can also be extremely charismatic and funny and a huge smile, and all the, and that works too. It sort of depends on what kind of personality type you have. For me, I'm a more of an observer at first, and kind of come out of a shell as reading the room. I think it has, I think the one thing, so to me, it's sort of like a combination of believing in myself, but not necessarily needing to play that on a stereo, like
Right.
on my head, to announce it to everyone that, hey, I think I'm the shit.
Yeah.
You know, but and that works for me. I think the other lesson I take from that is because and seeing so many people who manage to communicate effectively, whether as leaders or as teammates, co-workers, in different ways. It's those who are the best at it. They're doing whatever they're projecting. It feels like an authentic version of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone is a big personality and can sort of like, someone who first time they walk into a room, everyone can feel it, and just like, oh, this person is here to take charge.
Right.
As I think that doesn't work if it's not something you're comfortable doing. Like, if you try
Mm-hmm.
and do it, if you fake it, people can sense it, and they can sense it across, I think people can sense it across language barriers, across cultural barriers. I think, that, you being yourself, but being open, is something that I try to do consciously, but also think has it comes naturally to me in some ways, or at least feels comfortable to me, and I hopefully has made the people I've interacted with throughout my life feel comfortable around me.
Yeah. Well, I think, obviously, your journey, and I like focusing on that so much, because there is a lot of people who listen to podcasts are, coaches, they're leaders, or they're trying to get their life, I don't want to say on track, but I think a lot of us at times are wondering where we're headed in life, right? Even the people who supposedly have made it, we're all wondering, what's going to be next, or what is 5 years from now, 10 years from now. So, your insight has been absolutely really amazing. I got one last question for you. And it's this: when they make the Rafe Bartholomew full feature film movie, who is playing you, sir?
Wow. That's that. I've thought about this with my dad. When I thought about who would play him in a movie about the bar where he worked.
Yep.
And that would have been Ed Harris. I always thought. I thought, he has that
Yeah.
kind of authority. He can, he's a good guy, but he can get tough on you in a hurry. Me, ooh, all right. Let me think fast. Who would I want to be me? Um, I feel like it's gonna be all right. Look, it's the first name that came to mind, and I'm laughing at you all can laugh at me because it's worth clowning me over. Maybe Channing Tatum. I like,
I love it.
he's
Yes.
funny. He actually, as I mean, obviously, he's a better dancer than I ever was, and probably a lot more handsome. And I wish I had his body, at least in terms of the cuts, even in my very best shape. But he doesn't seem to take himself that seriously. He's
No.
he's really good in those comedy movies. I think he's smarter than he lets on, as a public figure. And he seems, and shoot, I mean, who wouldn't want to be played by some pretty good looking person?
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, everybody, listen, Rafe, it's been great having you on. You've got to pick up all three of his books: Basketball Love Story, 2 and 2, McSorley's My Dad and Me, and of course, Pacific Rims, which you spent the whole time pretty much talking about. If someone wanted to reach out to you, or you on social media, what's the best way to send a message for you for all our listeners?
Sure, absolutely. So on Twitter, it's my high school nickname. This is my first AOL screen name, or on AIM Messenger, Rafe Boogs, RAFEBOOGS. And I'm also on Instagram. It is harder to explain because it's a pun in Tagalog, but it's spelled Theo Paeng, or pronounced that way, or there's another way to pronounce it that's actually a little bit rude. It's TIYOPAENG. And even though people have told me over the years, man, you gotta quit it with those high school nicknames, or some name that the Alaska Aces gave you when you were hanging around them in 2007. Right. You gotta be a professional. Change it to Rafe Bartholomew. I'm attached. Those mean something to me. So
yep.
But if you are able to find me through those confusing old names, I can't wait to hear from folks, and I always try and respond.
I love it. All right, Rafe, thanks so much for joining us, man. I appreciate it.
Amanda, thank you.